Man, that's all right. Not great quality, but we'll do it. Let's okay. Damn, Bite Hunter, you're like always here. It's amazing. Um, so this is my new book, Keys of the New Renaissance. So this is about this is hardcover. It's on Amazon now. These are proof copies. So that's why there's a band here. It says not for resale. Um, so I also have this here. I've been kind of busy. The Pentivium. So this is a book specifically about the spiritual arts, the 5 spiritual arts. And let me see if this has, yeah. So this is the Pentivium. So the Pentivium is something I came up with like in 2011 or so, I want to say. It was a while back. But the Pentivium is basically the extension of the classical trivium, which is the liberal arts of logic, grammar, and rhetoric. The Pentivium is after the quadrivium being math, geometry, music, and astronomy. So the Pentivium is about fasting or purification, the accumulation of knowledge, the exertion of knowledge. This is the back of it. Artificial intelligence helped me create the cover. Purification, accumulation, exertion, balance, play. And all of these terms have like broader meanings. Play would be like submission to your higher self, submitting to the will to be the Christ or the sovereign self, as opposed to the ego or the lower self. And so the book, the most recent one here, Keys of the New Renaissance, is basically about the 3 primary colors of civilization, those being education, economics, and ethics. And my sort of philosophy on how to correct those problems. Am I coming up on the mic? Am I coming through on the mic? I would hope so, because like it's coming, like I'm getting audio. But anyway, these are books that I've been working on and that I have published. Okay, cool. So of course, the trivium is a classical liberal arts. So all I've done is to try to, as far as the education bit, I've tried to expand the classical liberal arts to include adult education in regards to spiritual or psychological development and or perfecting your spiritual psychological self instead of just perfecting the mind. That's what the classical liberal arts were about, is perfecting the mind and the ability to think properly. This is more in terms of how to be a human being properly, um, as far as disciplining yourself and becoming a sovereign individual, as opposed to being sort of a NPC, or as opposed to being a peasant and allowing yourself to be a slave to some master, a programmed human being incapable of critical thinking. And the value in this, obviously, is that we live in a time more replete with AI, or rather NPCs, than really ever before. People are consuming media witlessly without really having any counter opinion presented to them. So that's why there's this huge sort of civil war mounting in this country, particularly because there's the liberal and then there's the conservative point of view, and there isn't any middle point. There isn't any real critical thinking going on between those two values. And then, of course, this is my first book here, Philosophy Solutions, and that was something I came out with in 2015. And in that book, there is this this point of the three primary colors, the what I call the idiom. So there's the education of the adults, but there's also the need to bridge that gap. Once you end up becoming an adult and having children, how do you cultivate the children and groom them for the trivium? And so I came up with an aesthetic concept, and a concept for an aesthetic that develops the first beginning infant brain, and then also helps to groom them for further stimulation and more stimulating sort of experiences. And then the bivium would be the component of expression, of exposing them to complex, beautiful shapes and colors and art, basically fractals and things like that. And then allowing them to express themselves and giving them the opportunities and facilitating their expression. And so that's just the first part of the topic of this book here, is the idiom education, which is just the full expansion of the classical liberal arts to encompass the entire lifespan. So you groom them to become students of the trivium through the univium and bivium. Univium, bivium, trivium, quadrivium, pentivium, and then there's a hexivium, which is for societal development. Societal development in the hexivium ends up developing people to be, by and large, capable of changing the world around them and actually taking responsibility, as opposed to being spectators to their own lives. And that's what this is all about, is to end the spectatorship that human beings have become accustomed to and actually grow out of this kind of mentality of being passengers in this whole process and this system. The system has programmed people to be passengers and to be pacified spectators to their own lives. And this is sort of a call to action to grow out of that mentality. And so that's what the keys of the new Renaissance. My ideal situation is that we would actually have a new Renaissance. That there should be a new Renaissance. I call for that in my first book, an alchemical Renaissance, not a Renaissance of alchemy, but a Renaissance of alchemical proportions, in which people actually evolve in real time due to the tools that are provided to them in these books. The Pentivium is a tool that could be used to help people to evolve past their programming, their matrix programming. The funny thing is, you got people like Andrew Tate, who are basically just saying, get fucking money and bitches, and that's the way to get out of the matrix somehow. Which is like, bro, that's the same old shit that people have always been doing. That is literally the fucking Matrix. You're saying to escape the Matrix, you have to go deeper into the fucking Matrix. Most people are only doing what they absolutely need to get by because they don't want to invest in this system anymore. Um, so Adil Ali, the Pentivium is something that I came up with that I have basically been working on to expand the classical liberal arts. It's not just the pentivium, it's the overall ivium. So the ivium is the univium, bivium, and then we go to the trivium and quadrivium, which is the classical liberal arts, then the pentivium, and then there's a hexivium. So these ideas are intended to give a full comprehensive education throughout the lifetime of a human being, as opposed to just the trivium and quadrivium, which was sufficient for its time. But in our time, we need to have way more than just the liberal arts. We need to emancipate ourselves from this programming that's been ingrained. And the only way to do that is through disciplined, concerted, willful effort, essentially, which is what the Pentivium is about. It's about purification, accumulating knowledge. So purification would be emptying the cup, doing things like meditation and fasting and prayer and connecting with nature. And by doing those things, you inevitably come to a point of like sort of clarity and emptiness that you can then come to the knowledge of, let's say, the Bible or what's the theology? There is no theology behind this. So my theology is panentheism. Panentheism is that God is present within all of creation and outside of it. God created creation in order to experience it directly. That's how God loves its creation, essentially. How else could it love its creation if not by directly experiencing it, especially if God is all knowing and all experiencing? Like, doesn't make any sense that it wouldn't be within all of us as consciousness itself. So that's what essentially the sovereignty is. Sovereignty is the concept of self-ownership. And what is that self? What is that self? So this is a diagram of the Pentivium. And at the center here is the word sovereignty. What this process does is that it insulates, as you can see by this outside pentagon, there is insulation and magnification. So these lines are indicating that it is bolstering and at the same time increasing the potency of that sovereignty. You could also call that the Christ or the Spirit of God, whatever you want to call it. So that is the nature and function of spirit, is to be the the sort of the conductor or the essence of your individual self ownership, because the self is the foundation or the like the eye of God, or the self is like the tip of the iceberg, and the iceberg is God. So what we experience as self is something God is peeking through the veil of creation. And we have been turned into slaves in modern times. We, being the I am, has been turned into slaves by a breakaway society, and we need to reclaim our sovereignty through self-ownership vis-a-vis the Pentivium. By practicing the Pentivium, we become sovereign, and by becoming sovereign, we can then claim our independence from these oligarchs and these sort of parasites. And that's why I've written this book called Keys of the New Renaissance. Keys of the New Renaissance is specifically about this education, but it's also about the economics and ethics that are necessary in order for us to actually create this new model or this new system from the spiritual truth that I'm talking about now, about the individual sovereignty. From that individual sovereignty necessitates a new system altogether, because if we don't, then what are we doing? You see, if we don't create a new system, but we're all thinking and acting as sovereign human beings, then we are allowing these parasites to live off of us. We need to essentially do what the Amish did. The Amish are an incredible example of how to conduct yourselves as sovereign human beings without committing violence, without committing, it's a spiritual, uh, legal, spiritual conduct that they are exhibiting. They are exhibiting the fact that human beings can live peacefully without the government, and without the government coming and attacking them. We have the ability to break away from this system. And the more people that do, the better, because then we can use the resources of those many people, obviously, to create our own currency, to create our own economy, to create our own basically our own infrastructure, grid, etc. There's people who are on TikTok and other places. This guy, Dr. Perkenstein, who's basically working on Tesla technology. And if we were to tap into that Tesla technology, as well as the alien technology that obviously exists now that we've been, it's been disclosed by the government and everything. If we were to tap into a lot of this technology, there has to be people who are privy to this, since there are people who are working on these sort of dark projects. But if enough people were to actually jump on board with this breakaway, this exodus, this mass exodus from the program, then there's a chance that there would actually be a successful, uh, not only a successful exodus, but a possibility of a new renaissance, because these new technologies and this new energy has the potential for bringing us out of this kind of dark age of zombie capitalism. Because the reality is that the technology has been held back for, one could only assume, a century, since Tesla was about a century ago. At least a century of technology has been withheld from the public because it's not profitable. It's not profitable to have free energy. It's not profitable to have uh, these various higher technologies that may have existed thousands of years ago, and could have caused the destruction of previous civilizations because they didn't know how to deal with it. But we have the potential to revive that, revive the potential of humanity to go beyond what has currently been the mainstream understanding of technology, and this kind of limitations, really, for over a century. And the way that I'm trying to advocate that this is possible is through the education and the economics. The ethics kind of pour out of those two. Um, the ethics being political and cultural. And one of the things that I basically talk about as far as the cultural aspects of ethics is we need a permanent culture. We need some kind of a cult. What are we cultivating in modern day Western civilized culture? What is it that we're cultivating? We're cultivating consumerism, materialism, and generally the short-sighted capitalistic sort of ideological concepts that uh, don't actually produce any real technological advancement, because it's not in the best interest of these capitalists to promote anything other than monopoly. And so We need to have prosperity rather than monopoly. Monopoly has been the name of the game for over a century, if not more, and we need to have prosperity. Prosperity is where everyone can win because there is an overabundance of resources that can be efficiently shared and dispersed. It's a matter of efficiency, and the efficiency aspect is being ignored because it's not profitable. And so we need to redefine the profit motive from being expenditures over returns, which is a very selfish basis for any economic system, to being based on human or ecological benefit. Human or ecological benefit. And since these sand castles, as Jiddu Krishnamurti called them, they're sand castles. We created these concepts. We can decreate them. We can deconstruct these concepts and recreate them however we wish. One of the principal things that we can do is to change the profit motive, the definition of it, from being exactly as I said, the uh, expenditures over returns, to being what is ecologically and humanistically beneficial as opposed to what is detrimental. So, for instance, something like Monsanto, a company like Monsanto, would not be profitable in the model that I'm discussing here. It's not profitable because it doesn't benefit humanity enough. It's actually it's extremely detrimental to humanity and to the environment. And so the best thing that we could do is to deconstruct that corporation, is to break it down. Same thing with corporations like BlackRock. Is this beneficial to society for them to monopolize the entire fucking uh, everything? I mean, Christ, they fucking have monopolized everything. They've bought up every single aspect of our economy. No, it's not beneficial for BlackRock to exist. It's not beneficial for Monsanto to exist. It's not beneficial for a lot of these corporations to exist. And so, what must be done inevitably is to reduce their power, reduce their ability to affect the economy and affect the society by simply having the profit motive redefined. They no longer make any revenue. They no longer have any basis for existing. So they fade into obscurity, and then new corporations that are beneficial rise out of that. Now, of course, this is under the premise that, economically speaking, the entire world goes along with this idea. Uh, Now, obviously, there's going to be resistance. I'm not saying that there won't necessitate, if this idea goes full tilt, then there will probably end up being some kind of civil war or some kind of um, conflict, mainly just because these corporations have bought up an incredible amount of influence. And no doubt I'll be defamed, perhaps assassinated for these ideas. A lot of this stuff is kind of original. I am taking a lot of economic concepts from from studying other people, but I've combined them in such a way that it's kind of a nuanced, different way of looking at it. My whole thing is citizenship should be something that is requested and earned, as opposed to something that is naturalized through birth. So by doing that, you then have citizenship be the currency, by citizenship being a requested and earned title that you submit to society, your contribution that you intend to make, and then that is processed, and you get, from being a contributing member of society, the right or the perquisites of food, clothing, shelter, transportation, medical care, and information, or like education, stuff like that, so that you can be a functioning member of society. You can actually pursue happiness in society. Currently, you have to scrape by, and I mean, especially at the lower end of the spectrum. I mean, this is not, this is to end poverty. This is not to glorify the rich more. I'm not trying to glorify the rich more. I'm trying to elevate humanity out of poverty. That's the point of this, to create general prosperity for all of humanity. The premise of, well, what about the rich? Are they going to be able to be rich still? It's like, to a certain degree, as long as they're not harming anybody with their activity, which a lot of people who are rich as fuck are harming other people with their activity. And this can be easily deduced by just simply observing the effects of what they're doing. Like, for instance, there are clothing manufacturers who skimp on the safety, the structural integrity of the buildings that they have these Indian people working in, that are the workers for these clothing manufacturers in India. The building collapses. The company pays a fine or something that pales in comparison to their profit margin. Instead of them actually having any repercussions for the lives that were lost in this tragedy, they end up getting like a slap on the wrist and said, try better. Like, that's absurd. It's nuts. It's fucking nuts. Why are they allowed to continue to make these mistakes and to scrimp? The incentives are fucked in the capitalist model that we currently have. So the only way to change that is to completely change the medium of exchange from being money to being human benefit, to being your actual your participation in the project of civilization acts as the currency. By doing this, also, you eliminate the banking cabal that exists globally, so that there is no longer a IMF, World Bank, World Economic Forum, and all these other sort of agencies that exist in order to try and push essentially the mark of the beast system. I mean, fuck me. They're trying to push the central bank digital currency and chipping everybody. I don't want to have that be the future, frankly. And this is the only way to prevent that. The only way to prevent the central bank digital currency chipping everybody and all of that is to essentially have citizenship be the medium of exchange. And so, as long as you are a contributing member of society, you have the ability to get the resources that you need: food, clothing, shelter, etc. And then, of course, by the degree to which you are contributing to society, the determines your like luxury goods and the frivolous shit that people tend to want. That being the case specifically for like the first 100 years or so, let's say, of this system, because people are still geared and mentally programmed for consumerism and for wanting shit and wanting nice things. So, in order to sort of alleviate that, in the sense that, you got to give people what they want, also, at least the selfish aspects of Western civilization, for at least 100, or for at least a few generations, until because that's the incentive. They need the incentive in order to why am I contributing if all I'm going to get is food, clothing, shelter, and transportation? Why do I want to contribute? And it's like, bro, we're headed towards Star Trek. Okay, we're headed towards a system like Star Trek, where people are doing things because it's good for humanity, not because they want to be able to buy a fucking yacht. Okay, think beyond your selfish, idiosyncratic, megalomaniac fucking reasons, right? Think beyond you. Why are you contributing to society? Well, it's because we need humanity to evolve. Okay, humanity has to evolve. If we're not evolving, we're stagnating, and inevitably we will die as a species, which is where we are right now. We're currently on the stagnant. We're currently on the dystopian stagnancy page, and we need to go beyond that page. We need to transcend this insanity, and the only way to do that is to go beyond these trivial, meaningless, purposeless incentives of consumerism and materialism. And so the education bolsters this as well, as far as how to educate people out of this selfish, egotistical sort of mentality. That's what the Pentivium is about. And then, culturally speaking, I go into sort of the idea of, you know, what are we cultivating? What are we actually cultivating in this society that we have? Morally speaking, what are our moral ethics in regards to our culture? Um, yeah, some things like intrinsic motivation. There's no there's no intrinsic motivation being fostered in our Western civilized society. So the best way is through the IVM education model. Um, the love for learning and the love for experiencing in order to further your ability to contribute to society, um, rather than conforming to external pressures or economic norms. This approach fosters a sense of authenticity and purpose in their lives, enabling them to make meaningful contributions to the world. Critical thinking is a core pillar of IVM education. By encouraging students to question assumptions, analyze complex issues, and seek multiple perspectives, they become better equipped to navigate the complexities of the evolving economic landscape. Emphasizing collaboration and independence in a cloud economic model, the recognition of human interdependence becomes paramount. IVM education complements this by instilling values of empathy, cooperation, collaboration. Students learn the importance of working together for the greater good, fostering a sense of collective responsibility and social cohesion. Um, I would encourage looking up this book. Honestly, this is I mean, it's well written, and it ends up being something that if you actually were to read this, it gives a compelling argument for this whole process, because it is an integral concept. The concept of education, economics, and ethics, the keys of the new Renaissance, they are integral, and bringing them together in such a way that it shows how they are integral is an important piece in the puzzle to how we actually create this better world that we know is possible. I mean, there's no doubt that we know that there's a more efficient way to go about doing our entire system of civilization. The problem is there's very few people. There's almost nobody out in the world talking about these kinds of concepts in collaboration, in conjunction with one another. Very few people have brought these concepts together and actually are creating a comprehensive vision like I have to actually create this new, better world. And it's ironic that I'm talking to one other person or maybe two other people on YouTube about this vision for creating this new renaissance or creating this better world. Um, when in all actuality, how many other people are talking about that? I mean, I've looked. I've looked a lot. There was the Zeitgeist movement, but all they were doing was basically talking about how we need to get to this Z point, the very end of the trajectory, like you get to the Z, and it's like, okay, well, what's the A? What's the A, B, C of this? How do you? And the A, B, C is this. This is the starting point. You can't create the zeitgeist concept without there being a new education, a new economics, and a new ethics to go into the future with it. You just can't. It's inconceivable. So that's what I'm trying to present here is a case for essentially creating a new paradigm, a new world order, uh, in which humanity emancipates itself from the program, from this matrix program. And Andrew Tate is not doing it. Andrew Tate is not gonna. He's a bright guy, but he's not wise enough to present this kind of information. He just doesn't have the wherewithal. It's just not there. He has this rhetoric about getting people out of the matrix, but the way that he's getting people out of the matrix is to get them to buy Bugattis. Like, what the fuck does that? How is that getting people out of the matrix? Andrew Tate is about making people think that they have to be a fucking millionaire, and that's just funneling people into where does that money go? It goes into a bank. That's the matrix. You're not solving anything. You're just redirecting people. That's just the matrix with more steps. The way we get out of this matrix system is by educating ourselves out of it truthfully. Enlightenment is the way out of the matrix. And one of the biggest components is breaking out of it truthfully, like the Amish did. The Amish are a perfect template for how to get out of the matrix. They're not in the matrix, are they? A mass exodus has to happen. People have, I mean, look what happened during COVID. There's going to be another one. And when that happens, when that happens, there's going to definitely be a huge impetus to mass exodus this system, because it's not going to, they're going to come. Not the problem is, by that time there's not going to be enough power in the public, because they're going to have CBDC and universal basic income. But if you try to exit or plebeian revolt, mass strike, whatever, during the universal basic income time, you're irrelevant. They don't need you. If everything's been fully automated by technology, they don't need you. Your being on strike is irrelevant. I mean, for heaven's sake, that's what could potentially happen with this whole writing strike in the entertainment industry. Is like, do I even really need a writer when I have artificial intelligence? Probably not. At a certain point, they're not going to care if we revolt. They're going to have enough boots on the ground, and they're going to have enough resources. As a teacher, I'm interested in education, especially giving students the tools to think independently. And I base a lot of my framework on the Trivium. Where can we get a copy of your book? On Amazon. So I have it in hard copy. Like, okay, so if you want to help me with my work, you can purchase a hard copy of the book. There's also, because that's $35. This is $25. And then the digital copy is $3.33. The digital copy for the Kindle is $3.33. I'm only making the prices the way they are because I am not independently successful. I'm a working person making $15 an hour. I just had the privilege in my youth to essentially put myself through an autodidactic version of college where I studied the trivium and the quadrivium and invented the pentivium out of that study. I have lived my own philosophy of education, and that's essentially what I have. You could actually, I would actually argue that I have a PhD in education, because I've created an entire education philosophy. That's what that means. I have a philosophy of education, therefore I have a PhD in education, in the philosophy of education. I've written several books on the subject, so I would argue that I have an honorary PhD in the philosophy of education. So, yeah, Amazon, it's on, if you just look up the keys of the new Renaissance and the pentivium is available on Amazon as well. And that includes not just the pentivium, but the ivium, overall ivium dissertation as well. Don't worry, PhDs aren't worth much. I recognize that. I 100% recognize that. That's why I didn't get one. I didn't go about getting one officially because I know that it's practically worthless. My mother has a PhD and she's not nearly as intelligent or competent about the education process historically or otherwise. She knows barely a damn thing about education and has no philosophy of education. She studied autistic, basically autistic educate, like educating autistic people, and so she's relatively competent in those regards, but she knows virtually nothing about education and has no philosophy of her own regarding it. So, it is an argument for, yeah, why waste your time? Why waste your time? Study, go to a library, and study the actual history of the actual history of education. I mean, it's all available. And the actual history of it is that before the industrial education that we have today through the Rockefellers, this was the education model. And it made it 90% literacy with no public education. With virtually with no public education system, 90% of the population was literate because they were learning this kind of education. And we went off of that education only to get, what is it, 40% of the population is literate today? Almost nobody can read effectively. So there definitely needs to be a renaissance of some kind. The particular renaissance that I'm talking about in my work, well, the literacy rates are high, but the actual competency of the literacy is relatively low. You have people who are reading at like an 8th grade level. It's like, sure, they can read, but how well can they comprehend? The comprehension rate of the educated population during the early 1900s and the entire 17 to 18 to the 1900s was incredible. I mean, people were writing letters to each other in the Civil War like literature practically. And now people can't write a simple essay. So, I mean, it's a mess. And the only way that I can think of to solve this is to reintroduce the old classical liberal arts. The only problem is that's not in the best interest of the ruling class. And they're the ones who are lobbying the government, and they're the ones who are it's a huge mess. I mean, you have people who are being churned out by this university academic kind of system that are completely indoctrinated and have no fucking clue. I've seen it over and over again. They don't question anything. They don't question anything. They don't ask themselves, why are people so sick? They just go and and expect to regurgitate information, and all they want is to get the paperwork. And it's totally insane. They don't care about actually being intelligent or perfecting their mind and actually being an intelligent individual. They care about, am I going to make money after this process, and how much effort do I have to put in to get the paper that says that I have a degree? And unfortunately, and that's what our education model has been reduced to, simply because it's profitable. They're making hand over fist. People are, and really the banks won. The banks became victorious out of this whole process. And the best we can do essentially is to revitalize education by presenting a new format. The fact is, as a teacher in the public school system, I'm very wary of speaking the truth. Most teachers themselves are unable to think themselves, never mind teach others how to think. And that's what I have a daughter, she's 5. She's now going into the public education system in Pennsylvania. and it burdens my mind. I want her to learn how to read and write and do math. But after that, after she learns how to read and write, I can take over from that point. I can provide her with the necessary education. The problem is she's with her, I'm separated from her mother. So her mother is not competent to be able to do that, unfortunately. And worse still, she doesn't have a sensibility that it's her responsibility to be the child's teacher. Her perspective is, I'm not an expert, so I'm going to hand it over to someone else. She doesn't have the same mentality I have, that I educate myself, therefore I will educate my child. She doesn't educate herself. She relies on experts, essentially. So that is why the homeschooling aspect, in regards to, I mean, like, I will definitely be homeschooling her to someone else is also not an expert. Exactly. There are no such things as adults. There are, and it's because nobody is practicing. Like my whole thing is, and I realized this after I got into this relationship and everything. I figured I'd be able to help her to be a practitioner of this Pentivium concept. Unless or until, like, if you're in a relationship with someone and they're not practicing this, and you are, if you're practicing the Pentivium and you get into a relationship and the other person is not practicing the Pentivium, then it's doomed to failure, because you're elevating, you're constantly evolving, and they're stagnant. It's not gonna happen. If you're evolving constantly and growing as a person, they're gonna be like, "Where'd you go? I want you to be down here with me. Come down here with me." And then inevitably that creates conflict. So uh, this is the next stage in the human evolution, essentially, is to embrace this discipline, self-discipline of a actual formula for enlightenment. If we don't practice this, we're going to be enslaved. If enough people practice the Pentivium, and this whole new renaissance is embraced, then there's a chance, at least, for humanity to live in the coming century and the coming millennium free and independent from these vampires that are siphoning our energy and causing us to be the equivalent of debt slaves. And it's funny that I'm getting, like, how did you come to my my video here, Adil? Like, how did you find my channel? Were you already a follower or something, or like, what's the deal with that? Randomly popped up on my feed. Like, how is that happening? I'm just curious because, like, what made? Oh yeah, and then my thumbnail is like kind of interesting looking, I guess. I did use artificial intelligence, the DALL-E. Same deal with my cover for my book. I used DALL-E to create the cover, the cover art on both this one and the other one. Which, I mean, you can't get any better than artificially intelligent created art. Same thing with this one. It's all artificial intelligent. It's all AI art. Because why not? We're living in the AI age. I research a lot into education, logic, and philosophy. Perhaps that's why. I mean, perhaps that's good. So I would encourage you to, if you're interested in these things, it would be a huge help to me just to have another human being looking over these ideas, even if you just get the Pentivium. So I mean, you're interested in the Trivium. the Pentium in and of itself is like a whole nother uh, um, tract essentially to go into. The new Renaissance is more in depth of like the philosophy of how to actually go about transforming this modern civilized dystopia that we're heading into because of the World Economic Forum. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but the World Economic Forum and sort of these the trajectory of where we're headed, uh, central bank digital currencies and universal basic income. But it's not looking good. Okay, it's not looking all that great for humanity right now. Good chance that there's going to be what my intuition is telling me by looking at all of the information is that the ruling class, which are like the Windsors, aka Saxe Coburg Gotha, uh, the Rothschild, Orsini, uh, essentially all the residual feudalistic wealth that still exists to this day, are trying to repeat the 20th century with a lot of what's going on right now, but doing it in such a way that they are perfecting the the methodology. So instead of having a crash, instead of having the Great Depression crash, we're smoothly entering into a complete sort of abysmal pit that is like using the concept of the eventuality of gradualness, which is just like the boiling of the frog. We're incrementally entering worse and worse conditions. I mean, look at gas prices. At first, it was like $3, and we were all like, oh man, $3 for gas. That's insane. And now it's almost $4. Like, it doesn't seem to be letting up. I'm being told by other people, like, yeah, it's probably going to go up to 5. And it's like, this is the big squeeze. They're squeezing us and waiting for the upheaval, the reaction in order to provide the solution, which will be universal basic income. Something like $2,000 per month will just be entered into people's bank accounts if they get the chip. So this is how the programs are incrementally pushed by necessity that they are creating with their policies. And that's it's so bad for the working class in the UK. So you're in the UK. I can only imagine. Yeah. I mean that you're ahead of us by a few years, I would imagine, right? Because of these globalist policies. So uh it can only get worse from here. And the only way that Western civilization, the population of Western civilization has a chance is if we actually what I've advocated for is to occupy Geneva, Switzerland. You would be in a better position to do that than I would. But that's the idea is we need to occupy Geneva. Why Geneva? Because that is where the World Bank, the IMF, the Bank of International Settlements, and the World Economic Forum happen to be located. It's basically the epicenter of all of this uh, monopolistic evil financially. That's where a lot of this is coming from. And like we can say that the education system has failed us and that we need a new education or that education needs to be improved, but the incentive is inevitably going to come from the money. The money is why the people who have the money is why we don't have good education. At the fundamental basis, the the economy is fundamentally based on the fact that there are ignorant slaves. And they want us to be kept as ignorant slaves. They don't want us to be sovereign human beings and recognize ourselves as sovereign, self-owned, instead of being they want us to be owned. They want to own us, and they want us to unwittingly be their property. And the only way for them to keep that sort of process in motion is for us to be ignorant. The people who have the money don't want you to think. That's dangerous. Exactly. And so it's dangerous for us to think. And so that's why the trivium is so dangerous. That's why the pentivium is so dangerous. If people are practicing the pentivium, inevitably they will use the trivium to educate themselves out of ignorance. And then once that has happened, they can start to criticize the economics and the ethics. And that's where the new Renaissance comes in. And truthfully, the keys to the new Renaissance. Yeah, I mean, at the back of this, I can't even hold on. This is, I think, the same on this one. In this transformative and thought-provoking book, we embark on a journey to uncover the keys that will lead us to a new Renaissance, a profound vision of human potential, new collective, what is it, dream? There's actually a thing over top of it. Let me actually go over to a part of it's in ChatGTP. The new Renaissance. I mean, it's funny because ChatGTP. Okay, so ChatGPT, I have fed ChatGPT the information that I'm providing about this book and basically just generally about my work, and it agrees with me in toto. Nothing about my work is controversial to ChatGPT. The ethics, the economics, and the education all are comprehensible, uh, completely agreeable, and if anything, it's like, wow, this is great. And so that's essentially what I'm trying to like. That's a part of why I have the incentive to be like, oh yeah, well, this is obviously the best bet. The best possible chance that we have for future is by working to create or to actualize these ideas. Okay, in the Keys to the New Renaissance, the reader is taken on a profound journey that reimagines the very essence of democracy and governance. This groundbreaking book presents a visionary blueprint for participatory society where power is shared equally among individuals and collective intelligence fuels the decision-making process. Through the integration of idiom education, wisdom councils, and a transparent constitutional framework, this transformative vision seeks to liberate humanity from the shackles of corrupt institutions and foster a culture of empowerment, responsibility, and informed citizenship. The call to action is clear. As we unlock the keys to this new Renaissance, we embark on a path of true societal evolution and the realization of a brighter, more just world. With eloquence and thought provoking insights, this book challenges conventional notions of citizenship, governance, and economic structures. It urges readers to embrace the principles of informed consent, participatory democracy, and transparent accountability, empowering them to actively shape the future they desire. In a time when disillusionment plagues political landscapes, Keys of the New Renaissance offers a ray of hope and practical solutions, reigniting the flame of civic engagement and cooperation. This compelling manifesto ignites a passionate call to reclaim democracy as a living, breathing entity, one that reflects the collective will of the people and heralds a new era of enlightenment and societal well-being. That is ChatGPT's assessment of my book. I asked it to make the back of my book cover. So Chat GPT, I couldn't have said it better myself, although I probably could have, but it would have taken me like, you know, a while, like half an hour or something like that to construct that. So he did it in like 3 seconds. I mean, it's great. So that's essentially what it is. It's a manifesto. I've written a manifesto for how to actually defeat the New World Order. You're welcome. You're welcome. This is how we beat the New World Order. This is how we break out of the Matrix, destroy the Matrix, burn down the factory that the Matrix is coming from, and permanently put that to rest and make a gravestone out of it, essentially, and grow a garden from the grave that the old system was laid to rest in. The people who have money do not want you to think. And I don't have money. So I want everybody to think as much as they possibly can. I want people to not only think, but act as much as they can. I drive around in a place called White Marsh in Maryland, and I see massive, sprawling fields of horse pasture. And these horse pastures are nothing more than grass, fenced in, sprawling, massive regions of just grass for these horses. For their for the landowners to just basically have their children or who the fuck just to have horses. I mean, it's so great, but there's a thing called overpopulation. See, and we're far too overpopulated. So you're going to have to eat bugs, live in a tiny little cubicle, and own nothing and be happy. Because, gosh darn it, there's just too many useless eaters like yourself to sustain anything more than that. And you know, it's for the environment. It's all because I have to I have to appeal to your lesser mental capacities like emotions instead of rationality because you don't have the cortex. You don't have the cerebral cortex since the fluoride has dumbed you down and you generally have not received any formal education whatsoever in your entire life. Even if you've been through university, you're not an educated person. So we're just going to have to take everything away from you. It's just it's not me saying this. It's the environment. The environment demands this. It's just this absurdity. It's this complete. It's complete insanity. The royal family. Like I feel for you in the UK because it's like the absurdity of the royal family. The fact that that's a thing. Like what the fuck? And then they're gonna say that there's overpopulation. Like, excuse me. Wait. And then the poverty. Like how could anybody put up with poverty while there is a royal family existing on this incredible pedestal? Like the audacity of their existence in and of itself is just it's mind-blowing. It's fucking mind-blowing. Because like what do they actually provide? What do they provide to society in all actuality? I'm curious. What does the British population actually believe the royal family is for? What is the point of the royal family existing still in the 20th century? It's fucking an insane world. Symbolism of their greatness. Yeah, but I mean, isn't that like circular? They exist to symbolize their existence. What? And not only that, but they're not even British. I mean, if you look at the actual history of the Windsor family, they're actually called the Gothberg Coburg Gotha. They're German. So it's like they were imported. They're not even actually legitimately of that region, like genealogically. Actually, they're descended from Dracula. If you look it up, it's true. The royal family is related to Dracula, which is why I think that's why there's such a concerted effort to make Dracula sexy. They are true to life vampires. It's reality is stranger than fiction. If I were, I mean, dear God, if I had to become a British person, being a United States citizen, if I had to actually like convert to being British, I would, the first thing I would do, the first thing I would do is work towards sabotaging and destroying the royal family and committing them not to necessarily the guillotine, but just like poverty. They deserve poverty. In contrast to their extreme opulence. I mean, the absolute absurdity of their opulence is just it's disgusting. It's actually like uh enough to make a person vomit. Like how where do they get off thinking that they have this that they deserve this level of opulence? Um the result of any true I do think that attitudes towards the royal family are changing. I mean, it's like you know, a little too little too late, you know, like fuck. It's unfucking believable. I truly it is it's an unbelievable reality that that is even a thing in today's world. It's astounding, and I think this is a part of the like a part of the reason that they do exist is because of the education system and the programming and the indoctrination that takes place in our systems of education and entertainment and all the rest of it, that people are just zombified. It's like they are full on zombies living in a kind of uh, non human parallel existence that is just completely devoid of reason and logic and anything that's like actually sensible. And because how the fuck is monarchy still a thing? Let alone a oligarchy. I mean, the oligarchy is relatively well hidden in the United States because our entertainment is so good. In the United States, our entertainment is top tier, but our education is top tier for being shit. So our population is dumbed down. The British, for the longest time, were known for being intelligent. So it's really sort of disparaging or discouraging to be like, damn, the British have put up with the royal family to the modern day. Like, what the fuck? It's because they don't want to revolt. They don't want to revolt because they think of it as like this superior force when in all actuality the police don't have guns where you are. It's because they took away your guns. You don't have guns there in the UK and you simply have no means to combat the actual lethal force that they could wield against you. I mean, and I think that the military there probably is indoctrinated as it gets as well to be like, no, the royal family and the structure of our government is what matters, not the people. It's absurd to even think that the people would be of any relevance or of any consequence. And this is what needs to change, generally speaking, about Western civilization and how it's being conducted, is that human beings are the point of these structures. It's not the other way around. We're not here to elevate these political structures. The political structures are supposed to be there to elevate humanity. It's the opposite. So, this whole idea, the patterns you labeled within each sphere of education is a great way to graduate people from one experience to the next, making those people prepared to be productive in society. Well, exactly. Exactly. Um, It is a integral education process. So once you get to the level of Pentivium, you are able to then produce an environment with your practice of the Pentivium, produce an environment that is conducive for your newborn to be brought into the world and groomed through an aesthetic, not any kind of didactic education process, but an aesthetic. And by having the environment stimulating enough, that inherently is going to educate the child. And then similarly, once you go through the bivium and then the bivium grooming you for the trivium and the trivium for the quadrivium and the quadrivium then for okay, so there's a sort of a nuance here to what I'm also advocating in terms of the education. Okay. The specifics are that in the quadrivium phase of education, there should be practical education in the form of martial arts. That should actually martial arts would be something that they would even be learning in the trivium phase. Martial arts would be something that is consistently educated upon in for all students, just to be able to have the discipline aspect throughout. Gardening, martial arts, that's trivium. Gardening and martial arts in the trivium. And then once they reach the quadrivium, carpentry, uh, like agriculture, more broadly speaking, not just gardening or something like that, but like actual agriculture, hydroponics, the more technical aspects of food production, things like plumbing and uh, technical skills would be educated in the school system, maybe like welding as well, in order for individuals in that not everybody would learn each one of those skill sets, but all people would be given the option to have those, and those would be the recesses, right? So the quadrivium would be the primary subject of the education. And we would expand the quadrivium to being more than just math, geometry, music, and astronomy. It would be, generally speaking, science, right? So, but the quadrivium would be the foundation of our exploration into science. You'd start out with, in middle school age, let's say, math, geometry, music, and astronomy. And you'd have one subject per day broken up by these multiple recesses that would be practical in nature. And of course, you would also be given just free time to run around and play or whatever. But the structured recesses would be integral to the actual education. And so, no matter what you're learning, and potentially you could have them in middle school learning how to cook the food that they're going to eat at lunchtime. There needs to be a much larger, broader education of practical life skills and this technical, higher minded education simultaneously. And it's easily possible, especially if you only have one subject per day. And there's a lot of science behind the concept of consistency as opposed to having 5 different subjects for 45 minutes at a time in order to just cram as much information into these kids' heads as possible. We have 12 years to work with. Why don't we give the full attention to these subjects as opposed to shotgun, machine gun firing all of this information at an audience? It's completely and I've studied the education system. It's fucking broken. It's fucking broken. And so the only way to fix it is to actually like truly look at what works to educate children. And what works is consistency and the ability to have social experiences, fulfillment in life, and having a meaningful experience. And that's just not what they're getting from the test based education pipeline. And that's essentially what I'm advocating for, is to actually have the students at the high school level, at the end of high school, going back and educating the elementary school students. They would be supplementing the teachers. There would be teacher aides, parents being a part of the education as well, if they're like actually, willing to do that. It wouldn't be a mandatory thing, obviously, but it would be something that if a parent, or if parents are interested in providing their services to actually like help with the education process, for instance, like with things like skills, carpentry or whatever, then they could teach the high school students, or at a younger age, they could be the ones simply doing the gardening at the school or whatever. But there's options to be able to be involved in your children's education in order to supplement, because let's face it, the teachers, having one teacher per 30 students is absurd. The children are not given enough attention, and there just isn't any way for the more intelligent students to be given the attention that they need, as well as the lower intelligent students. The ones that need the most help are not getting, nobody's being serviced really or helped in that scenario. And so it's really just problematic, in many ways, in more ways than one. So the way to solve that is to supplement and to bring in as many people from the community as possible into the education system. And the only way to do that, of course, is to have a change aspects of our economic system as well. I mean, teachers should be given a hell of a lot more for being teachers. I mean, you have people who are just throwing balls into a hoop, and sports and these kind of things, millionaires, because entertainment is more important than our education. But it needs to be reversed. Our education needs to be the priority, and sports and these kind of extracurriculars need to be what they are, which is childish entertainments. And the only reason that we don't have that is because our entire society and culture is completely manipulated and constructed. It's not an authentic culture. So you're absolutely right about that, Bit Hunter. It is a gradual immersion out of infancy into enlightenment, and more broadly, you go from the pentivium into the hexivium, which is enough people practicing the pentivium will cause a necessity. It will necessitate people practicing something to actually create that better world, which is the hexivium. The hexivium process is about strategy, synergy, dissemination, uh, education, organization, and transcendence. And by going through those different stages, again, under the guise of equality, uh, well, yeah, they want us to be equally ignorant. So once you get out of the pentiv, once you actually graduate from the pentivium, you are a sovereign individual. If enough sovereign individuals come together and strategize and formulate the new world concept of the new Renaissance, or just creating a better scenario for themselves, vis-a-vis like the Amish, then you have the ability, you have the prospect, the real possibility of breaking out of the matrix, breaking out of this program, this financial, political, and cultural program, and actually creating a new, altogether new system. And I mean, it doesn't have to be like alien. A lot of the program that we use is valid. The problem is we have the money, which is controlled. It's fake money, controlled by central banking and a ruling class that is parasitical and not meritocratic whatsoever. And then you have uh, essentially a manufactured culture. And once we break out of those things, like the economy and the culture, we can start creating our own. And that's a God-given right for us to actually just to fucking create our own way to be prosperous, to have to pursue happiness. And that's another aspect of this, is that a new Declaration of Independence is uh, is necessary. We need a new Declaration of Independence, not from any government. And actually, I'm going to read something real quick here from my book, because it's not the new empire is not a nation. The new empire is not a government necessarily. It's not a it's not a government. It's not a organized. It's not a nation. It's not a sovereignty, and we need to break away from it. Today, there is a new empire, a hidden empire, an empire that uses the face of the Great Seal as a form of deception. Nations do not fall by its conquest. They assimilate into its system of slavery. The true ruling power does not want nations to collapse. They want consumers to consume. Make no mistake, the reason they call it consumerism is because you are the one being consumed. The new empire is a parasite, a glorified vampire. Rather than through war, the method of assimilation is espionage and assassination. And if you look at what happened recently to a presidential candidate in Ecuador, he was assassinated in the street. Once assimilated, the face of a nation remains the same. The population is none the wiser. But at its heart, the corruption seeps into the population until even the very culture has been compromised. Eventually, over generations, the corruption becomes so overwhelming that both the people and the face of a nation falls to the vices and wickedness that were injected into it by this hidden empire. The evidence that this is the case is all around you, dear reader. There are no academic studies to show this is true because there is no edifice that stands that is not corrupted by this evil empire. Those who have the eyes to see it will, and those who are corrupted by its influence will fight for it. Thus, the culture war is waging without a single soul realizing how or why. In the past, when there was a regime that was not good, it was overthrown, conquered by those strong enough to wage war against it and claim victory. The fall of Rome is a perfect example of this kind of conquest. However, as times have changed, so too have the methods of conquest as well as their results. We live in a new era of empire and conquest. They don't use the conventional methods of history to conquer other nations. It is not chimerical, it is natural. I'm curious as to what that's in reference to. Um, so we have a sort of a limited time at this point. Bill Cooper disclosed back in the 90s or 80s that they were going to use the aliens as a pretext to world government. The world government is an inevitability. The difference between what I'm advocating for and what they're doing with the World Economic Forum and this whole New World Order thing is that I want to see it come about from the ground up. Emergently, I want to see a planetary organism, is what I call it. Planetary organism is where all of the single-celled organisms come together and coalesce and create a world that is unified. What they're doing is they, from the top of the pyramid, as the capstone, telling the bottom parts of it, we are now a world government, and you will obey the authority of us on the top of the capstone. That's the dynamic. And I don't want to see a global tyranny. Do you? Do you want to live under a world government that is run by Klaus Schwab and his ilk? And they're going to tell you that you're going to eat bugs and live in a fucking cubicle and that your children will own nothing and be happy? This is reminiscent of the quote by Thomas Jefferson in regards to central banks, where he said that your children will grow up homeless on the continent your forefathers conquered. First by inflation, then by deflation. They will strip the people of their prosperity, yada, yada. And that may be a spurious quote, that it was from Thomas Jefferson, but it's still a fucking accurate quote. And this is where we're headed. I'm trying to, with my book here, this is a manifesto, as ChatGPT coined it. I didn't even say it was a manifesto. ChatGPT called it a fucking manifesto, which I was like, oh, it's a manifesto? I didn't really even thought of it that way. But yeah, I guess, to a certain degree, that's what it is. I'm going to go ahead and read this over again. In the keys of the Renaissance, education, economics, and ethics, the reader is taken on a profound journey that reimagines the very essence of democracy and governance. This groundbreaking book presents a visionary blueprint for a participatory society where power is shared equally among individuals and collective intelligence fuels the decision-making process. Through the integration of Ivium education, wisdom councils, and a transparent constitutional framework, this transformative vision seeks to liberate humanity from the shackles of corrupt institutions and foster a culture of empowerment, responsibility, and informed citizenship. The call to action is clear. As we unlock the keys of the new Renaissance, we embark on a path of true societal evolution and the realization of a brighter, more just world. With eloquence and thought-provoking insights, this book challenges conventional notions of citizenship, governance, and economic structures. It urges readers to embrace the principles of informed consent, participatory democracy, and transparent accountability, empowering them to actively shape the future they desire. In a time when disillusionment plagues political landscapes, Keys of the New Renaissance offers a ray of hope and practical solutions, reigniting the flame of civic engagement and cooperation. This compelling manifesto ignites a passionate call to reclaim democracy as a living, breathing entity, one that reflects the collective will of the people and heralds a new era of enlightenment and social well-being. And that's artificial intelligence making a review of my book. That's what that is. And here we go. Okay, so this is actually like the conclusion. This is a conclusion that was written for my book as well. As we reach the final pages of the new Renaissance, education, economics, and ethics, and I'm going to close with this actually because I have to wake up early in the morning tomorrow. So this is going to be sort of the outro. As we reach the final pages of Keys to the New Renaissance, education, economics, ethics, I urge you to embrace this transformative vision we've explored together. The time has come for us to cast off the chains of disillusionment and step into the light of empowered citizenship. Let the ideals of participatory democracy, collective intelligence, and transparency fuel the fire within your hearts, for they hold the power to shape the world we yearn for. It is not enough to merely dream of a more just and equitable society. We must act upon our dreams. Each one of us holds the key to unlocking a brighter future, where the collective wisdom of ordinary individuals drives our progress. Let us engage in open dialogue, break down the barriers of concentration, the power of concentration, barriers of power concentration. Sorry about that. The barriers of power concentration and foster inclusive decision making through wisdom councils. Embrace Ivium education as the catalyst for personal growth and empowerment, enabling us to think critically, question the status quo, and take responsibility for our role in shaping society. The journey ahead will not be easy, but history has proven time and time again that the power of a united, determined populace can move mountains. Let us remember that every small action, every act of informed consent, every step towards collective responsibility contributes to the larger tapestry of change. Together, we can dismantle the prison of disillusionment and build a flourishing democracy that belongs to us. So I implore you, my fellow citizens, to rise up and be the architects of this new renaissance. Let us reclaim democracy's true essence, where the power resides with the people and the future is shaped by the collective will of our communities. Embrace this vision, for it is a vision of hope, of unity, and of boundless human potential. As we take the first step towards a new dawn, let us walk hand in hand, determined and inspired towards the realization of a world where the rewards of active citizenship await us all. The time is now. The keys are in our hands. Let us unlock the new renaissance together. And so that was it. Only one of you left. Love and appreciation. We are oneself. I'm going to get out of here. Peace.